Abstract, public sector organizations face persistent pressure to innovate while navigating bureaucratic constraints that often inhibit creativity and experimentation. This article examines the interplay between public service motivation, PSM, organizational red tape, and job satisfaction in shaping innovation outcomes within government and nonprofit contexts. Drawing on organizational behavior literature, institutional theory, and evidence from diverse public agencies, we demonstrate that high PSM can buffer against the demotivating effects of red tape while simultaneously catalyzing innovative behaviors when coupled with adequate job satisfaction. Conversely, excessive procedural burden systematically erodes both satisfaction and innovation capacity, even among highly mission driven employees. We present evidence based organizational responses spanning transparent governance reforms, procedural rationalization, participatory innovation structures, and capability building initiatives. The synthesis reveals that sustainable public sector innovation requires intentional management of the psychological contract, distributed leadership models, and continuous learning systems that honor both accountability imperatives and creative problem solving. Public administrators worldwide confront a paradox. Citizens demand more responsive, efficient, and innovative government services while simultaneously expecting rigorous accountability, fairness, and compliance with established procedures. This tension manifests daily in the experiences of public servants who bring genuine commitment to serving the common good, what scholars term public service motivation, yet encounter organizational red tape that constrains their ability to deliver meaningful outcomes. Perry and Wise, 1990. Bozeman, 1993. The stakes are considerable. When innovation stalls in public agencies, communities suffer delayed responses to emerging challenges, from climate adaptation to digital service delivery to pandemic response. When job satisfaction deteriorates, talented professionals exit to private or nonprofit sectors, draining institutional knowledge and capacity precisely when it's most needed. Moynihan and Pandy, 2007. When excessive red tape accumulates, organizations become sclerotic, unable to adapt to changing circumstances or learn from failure. Bozeman and Feeney, 2011. Yet some public organizations successfully navigate this terrain, fostering cultures where motivated employees remain engaged, procedural safeguards coexist with experimentation, and innovation flourishes despite bureaucratic constraints. Understanding how these organizations achieve this balance carries practical implications for executives, middle managers, and frontline supervisors seeking to energize their teams and deliver better public value. This article synthesizes current evidence on the relationships among public service motivation, red tape, job satisfaction, and innovation in government contexts. We examine how these forces interact, identify their organizational and individual consequences, present evidence based interventions that practicing managers can deploy, and outline strategies for building long term adaptive capacity within bureaucratic structures. The public sector innovation landscape, defining public service motivation and its role in innovation. Public service motivation represents an individual's orientation toward serving the public interest, characterized by attraction to policymaking, commitment to civic duty, compassion, and self sacrifice. Perry and Wise, 1990. Unlike private sector employees primarily motivated by profit or advancement, public servants often report stronger intrinsic motivation tied to societal impact and community benefit. This motivation matters profoundly for innovation. Research demonstrates that employees with high PSM exhibit greater willingness to engage in problem solving behaviors, persist through implementation challenges, and champion improvements that benefit service recipients rather than personal advancement. They interpret obstacles as challenges to overcome rather than reasons to abandon reform efforts. However, PSM alone proves insufficient. Studies have found that PSM's positive effects on performance materialize primarily when organizational conditions support employee autonomy and reduce obstructive barriers. Wright and Pandy, 2008. When bureaucratic constraints overwhelm intrinsic motivation, even highly committed public servants disengage or exit. Understanding red tape in public organizations. Red tape refers to rules, regulations, and procedures that remain in force and entail a compliance burden but serve no legitimate organizational purpose or generate negative net benefits. Bozeman, 1993. Bozeman and Feeney, 2011. This definition distinguishes red tape from functional formalization, necessary procedures that ensure fairness, accountability, transparency, and legal compliance. The distinction matters because not all bureaucracy constitutes red tape. Standardized procurement processes that prevent corruption serve legitimate purposes, requiring those same approvals for routine office supplies may not. Red tape emerges through several pathways. Rules outliving their original purpose, procedures designed for exceptional cases applied universally, compliance requirements imposed by external authorities, and defensive routines protecting organizations from liability. Kaufman, 1977. Research consistently links red tape to reduced innovation and organizational effectiveness. Excessive procedural burden crowds out time for creative work, forces risk averse decision making, and signals to employees that compliance matters more than outcomes. Bozeman and Feeney, 2011. The accumulation of unnecessary rules creates friction that slows response times and diminishes adaptive capacity across public agencies. State of practice, innovation challenges across public sectors. Public sector innovation varies considerably across contexts. Research on government agencies shows that innovation success depends heavily on leadership commitment beyond rhetorical support, protected time and resources for experimentation, and tolerance for intelligent failure. Borens, 2014. Organizations lacking these conditions struggle despite employee motivation. Three consistent patterns emerge from studies of public sector innovation. First, pockets of excellence. Innovation labs, digital service teams, challenge competitions often coexist with largely traditional bureaucratic operations within the same government. Second, middle managers play crucial bridging roles between innovation aspirations and operational realities, requiring protected time and visible executive backing when facing resistance. High, 2002. Third, bureaucratic constraints affect different sectors uniquely. Healthcare organizations balance clinical safety protocols with treatment innovation. Educational institutions navigate standardized accountability alongside pedagogical creativity. And social service agencies manage eligibility requirements while experimenting with prevention oriented approaches. Each context presents unique red tape challenges that shape how PSM translates into innovative action. Understanding these sector specific dynamics proves essential for designing effective interventions rather than applying generic solutions across disparate organizational settings. Organizational and individual consequences of the PSM red tape satisfaction nexus. Organizational performance impacts. The interaction between PSM, red tape, and job satisfaction produces measurable organizational outcomes. Research demonstrates that agencies with higher average PSM levels can demonstrate superior performance on objective indicators, including shorter processing times, higher citizen satisfaction scores, and more effective program outcomes. However, these potential benefits diminish significantly in high red tape environments. Bozeman and Feeney, 2011. Evidence suggests that organizations reducing administrative burden through process redesign can experience substantial improvements in employee-reported innovation behaviors and external stakeholder satisfaction. These gains prove most pronounced in agencies with higher baseline PSM scores, suggesting that reducing red tape unlocks latent innovative potential among mission-driven employees. Conversely, organizations experiencing rising red tape face predictable deterioration. Declining job satisfaction correlates with increased absenteeism, higher turnover among high performers, and reduced discretionary effort. Employees doing only what's explicitly required rather than going beyond formal duties. Moynihan and Pandy, 2007. Over time, these individual responses aggregate into organizational rigidity, slower response times, and diminished adaptive capacity. The financial implications prove substantial. Estimates suggest that red tape costs governments considerable resources through duplicative approvals, delayed procurement, inefficient workflows, and compliance overhead that generates minimal value. Kaufman, 1977. These costs represent potentially redirectable resources that could support mission-critical activities instead of administrative friction. Individual well-being and public value impacts. For individual employees, The collision between high PSM and excessive red tape creates psychological distress. Public servants enter government work expecting to make meaningful differences in citizens' lives. When procedures prevent them from delivering on this implicit promise, they experience frustration, cynicism, and disengagement. D. Hart Davis, 2009. This dynamic particularly affects frontline workers, who directly witness how procedural barriers harm service recipients. A child welfare worker prevented from expediting foster placement due to bureaucratic delays. A housing inspector unable to flag dangerous conditions because of jurisdictional technicalities, or a veteran services counselor watching benefits applications languish in approval queues. Each experiences the gap between their motivations and organizational realities. Job satisfaction mediates these relationships. Employees who maintain satisfaction despite red tape, often through supportive supervision, team cohesion, or periodic wins, sustain higher performance and innovation. Those whose satisfaction erodes show declining performance over time, and organizational conditions can potentially deplete even initially strong public service commitment. Wright and Pandy, 2008. The consequences extend to service recipients. When red tape frustrates innovative problem solving, citizens receive lower quality services, experience longer wait times, and encounter less responsive government. Programs fail to adapt to changing community needs. Evidence based practices languish unadopted. Digital transformation initiatives stall in procurement bureaucracy. The cumulative effect undermines public trust and democratic legitimacy. Evidence based organizational responses. Transparent communication and expectation setting. Research demonstrates that transparent communication about procedural requirements, their rationale, and constraints can significantly buffer red tape's negative effects on satisfaction and innovation. When employees understand why certain procedures exist, accountability to elected officials, legal mandates, equity considerations, they experience less frustration and find creative solutions within constraints rather than viewing all rules as arbitrary obstacles. The key lies in distinguishing legitimate formalization from genuine red tape. Leaders who candidly acknowledge unnecessary procedures, explain political realities preventing immediate reform, and invite employee input on improvement priorities build trust and maintain engagement. D. Hart Davis, 2009. Effective approaches include regular procedural review sessions, where frontline staff identify rules that obstruct mission achievement without serving accountability purposes. Public rationale statements accompanying new requirements that explain the problem being addressed and success criteria for eventual elimination. Escalation protocols allowing employees to flag situations where procedural compliance would produce clearly counterproductive outcomes. Leadership listening sessions specifically focused on bureaucratic barriers rather than generic engagement forums. Organizations that have implemented quarterly red tape reduction workshops, where regional teams identify procedural barriers and work with central policy staff to eliminate or streamline requirements, report substantial benefits. By systematically reviewing and eliminating unnecessary approval steps, agencies can reduce project initiation times while maintaining accountability standards. Such initiatives often correlate with improved employee satisfaction scores and enhanced capacity for innovation in service delivery. Procedural justice and fair process. Even when procedures cannot be eliminated, how they're implemented profoundly shapes employee responses. Procedural justice research demonstrates that when people perceive decision-making processes as fair, characterized by voice, consistency, bias suppression, and explanation, they accept outcomes more readily and maintain higher satisfaction even with unfavorable results. Thibaut and Walker, 1975. Applied to public sector contexts. This means involving employees in designing implementation approaches for mandated requirements, ensuring consistent application across units, explaining the reasoning behind procedural decisions, and creating mechanisms for legitimate exceptions. When employees feel heard and respected within bureaucratic systems, they're more likely to find innovative workarounds rather than simply complying minimally. Organizational strategies include participatory rulemaking, where implementation teams include frontline staff who understand operational realities. Exception review boards with clear criteria and transparent decision making for justified procedural variances. Feedback loops demonstrating how employee input shaped final procedures or explaining why suggested changes weren't feasible. Consistency audits revealing whether similar situations receive similar procedural treatment across divisions. Some municipal governments have established innovation review boards, comprising frontline employees, middle managers, and senior executives to evaluate requests for procedural exceptions supporting innovation pilots. Using transparent criteria, public benefit potential, risk mitigation plans, learning objectives, and publishing decisions with rationale, these boards maintain accountability while enabling experiments. Transparent processes can maintain procedural integrity while signaling genuine organizational support for innovation attempts. Capability building and protected innovation time. Even motivated employees in reasonably functional bureaucracies require skills, resources, and protected time to innovate effectively. Many public servants possess deep programmatic expertise but lack training in design thinking, rapid prototyping, stakeholder engagement, or change management, capabilities essential for translating ideas into implemented improvements. Organizations successfully fostering innovation invest in structured capability development while simultaneously protecting time for creative work. This dual approach signals genuine commitment rather than rhetorical support, building employee confidence that innovation attempts will receive adequate support rather than becoming additional burdens atop existing duties. High impact interventions include innovation fellowships or rotations, allowing employees to spend 3 to 6 months working on challenge focused projects with coaching support. Structured innovation methods training in human centered design, agile development, or lean process improvement adapted for public sector constraints. Protected experimentation time, e.g., 10 to 15% of work hours, with explicit permission to pause routine tasks for innovation projects. Cross-functional innovation teams combining diverse perspectives and distributing workload to prevent individual burnout. Public sector organizations that create intensive innovation programs, offering week-long sessions where cross-agency teams tackle shared challenges using structured problem-solving methods, report meaningful results. Participants receive training in design thinking, prototyping, stakeholder analysis, and change leadership. Teams develop implementation plans with assigned executive sponsors and protected time for execution. These structured approaches help participants build innovation confidence and generate implementable improvements across diverse service areas. Operating model and governance adaptations. Traditional hierarchical structures with centralized decision making often prove incompatible with innovation, particularly in large bureaucracies where approval chains create delay and diffuse accountability. Organizations successfully balancing accountability with innovation frequently adopt hybrid governance models, creating protected spaces for experimentation while maintaining oversight for core operations. These approaches recognize that not all organizational functions require identical procedural rigor. High volume, high risk transactions, e.g., benefit payments, law enforcement, demand strong controls. Exploratory initiatives testing new approaches benefit from lighter oversight focused on learning rather than compliance. Mixing these governance models within single organizational structures requires intentional design and clear boundary setting. Structural innovations include two-speed governance architectures with differentiated approval processes for operational excellence versus exploratory innovation. Innovation sandboxes with pre-approved risk parameters, allowing rapid experimentation without individual approval requirements. Distributed decision authority, empowering frontline teams to implement low-risk improvements without hierarchical approval. Accountability shifting from process compliance to outcome achievement for designated innovation initiatives. Healthcare systems have successfully established innovation hubs in regional networks, empowered to identify promising local innovations, evaluate evidence, and facilitate adoption across facilities without requiring central approval for each adaptation. Operating under pre-negotiated risk parameters and reporting on outcomes rather than seeking process approvals, these distributed models can accelerate the spread of effective practices while maintaining appropriate oversight. Frontline staff in such systems often report higher satisfaction with their ability to improve service delivery. Recognition and incentive realignment. Public sector compensation structures typically offer limited financial incentives, making non monetary recognition crucial for sustaining innovative behavior. However, many agencies inadvertently reward procedural compliance while offering only rhetorical praise for innovation, creating misaligned incentives that rational employees notice and respond to accordingly. Effective recognition systems honor multiple forms of contribution, not only successful innovations, but also intelligent failures that generate learning, collaborative support roles, and systematic improvement efforts. When recognition aligns with espoused innovation priorities and carries genuine status within organizational cultures, it reinforces desired behaviors even without substantial financial rewards. Strategic approaches include peer nominated innovation awards, emphasizing collaborative achievement and mission impact rather than individual heroics. Learning from failure forums, where teams share unsuccessful experiments and extracted lessons without career penalty. Innovation metrics in performance evaluations, balanced with operational excellence to signal dual priorities. Executive visibility for innovators through presentations to leadership, board briefings, or public recognition events. Interministerial innovation units in several countries have created prestigious public innovator awards nominated by peers and selected by panels including citizens, academics, and international experts. Winners receive professional development opportunities and invitations to advise other agencies on innovation initiatives. Such awards become culturally significant within public service, shifting norms around innovation prestige. Notably, effective programs recognize teams whose experiments failed but generated valuable insights, reinforcing psychological safety around intelligent risk taking. Building long term innovation capability. Psychological contract recalibration. The implicit psychological contract between public sector employers and employees has traditionally emphasized job security, pension benefits, and mission driven work in exchange for lower compensation and acceptance of bureaucratic constraints. Rousseau, 1995. However, this contract requires updating for contemporary conditions, where fiscal pressures threaten security. Talent markets offer mission driven opportunities beyond government, and younger workers prioritize learning and impact over tenure. Forward looking agencies explicitly renegotiate these expectations, positioning themselves as platforms for professional growth, capability development, and meaningful problem solving rather than merely stable employment. This reframing attracts and retains different talent profiles. Professionals seeking to build capabilities applicable across sectors while contributing to public value during their government tenure. The recalibrated contract emphasizes mutual investment. Organizations provide learning opportunities, innovation infrastructure, and skill building in exchange for employees bringing fresh perspectives, challenging established practices, and driving improvement. This arrangement proves more sustainable than traditional models when economic conditions undermine job security promises. Leaders advance this shift through transparent conversations about evolving employment relationships, institutional investment in professional development, career pathways valuing diverse experiences, including sector mobility, and explicit acknowledgement that not all public servants will spend entire careers in government. And this represents opportunity rather than failure. Distributed leadership and innovation champions. Sustainable innovation requires leadership at multiple organizational levels rather than dependency on heroic individual executives. Distributed leadership models identify and empower innovation champions throughout organizational hierarchies. Frontline staff who understand operational realities, middle managers who can provide political cover and resources, and senior executives who shape strategic direction. These champions require support beyond formal authority. Research demonstrates that successful middle managers bridging innovation aspirations with operational realities need protected time, access to resources, connections to peer networks, and visible executive backing when facing resistance from status quo defenders. High 2002. Organizations that develop dense networks of empowered champions create resilience. When individual leaders depart, institutional capability persists. Building distributed leadership involves intentional identification of potential champions across levels, targeted development of their influencing capabilities, creation of cross-functional communities where they support each other, and structural positions or roles legitimizing their work. Many successful agencies establish formal innovation networks, liaison positions, or communities of practice providing these functions. Purpose, connection, and belonging. While PSM represents individual motivation, organizations must continuously reinforce connections between daily work and ultimate public purpose. Employees performing routine tasks can lose sight of their contribution's societal impact, particularly in large bureaucracies where outputs feel distant from outcomes. Grant, 2007. Leaders combat this drift by regularly illustrating how specific organizational improvements tangibly benefit real people, creating opportunities for staff to meet service recipients and hear their stories, sharing data showing population level impact, and helping employees understand their role in broader mission accomplishment. Research on beneficiary contact demonstrates that such interventions significantly increase motivation, persistence, and innovative problem solving. Grant, 2008. Simultaneously, belonging, feeling genuinely included, valued, and psychologically safe, proves essential for innovation risk taking. Employees will only challenge existing practices, admit mistakes, or propose unconventional solutions when they trust their standing won't suffer for doing so. Building inclusive cultures where diverse perspectives receive genuine consideration and where constructive conflict coexists with interpersonal respect creates conditions for breakthrough thinking. Edmondson, 1999. Organizations strengthen purpose and belonging through structured storytelling about mission impact, rotating staff through beneficiary facing roles, diversifying leadership to reflect communities served, establishing explicit inclusion norms and accountability, and creating forums where employees safely surface concerns without career risk. Continuous learning systems and evidence infrastructure. Innovation capability ultimately rests on organizational learning, the ability to systematically extract insights from experience, disseminate promising practices, abandon ineffective approaches, and refine understanding of what works in which contexts. Public sector organizations frequently struggle with learning because political cycles encourage short term thinking, staff rotation disperses knowledge, and risk aversion discourages experimentation from which to learn. Moynihan, 2008. Building learning infrastructure requires several elements: clear metrics defining success for innovation initiatives, disciplined evaluation capturing both intended and unintended effects, accessible repositories making insights available across organizational boundaries, structured reflection processes where teams analyze experiences before moving to next priorities, and incentives rewarding knowledge sharing rather than hoarding. This infrastructure proves particularly crucial for managing the PSM red tape tension. When organizations systematically track which procedures generate value versus bureaucratic friction, they develop evidence supporting targeted reform. When they evaluate innovation attempts and disseminate findings, they prevent repeated failures and accelerate successful practice diffusion. When they capture tacit knowledge from experienced staff before retirement, they preserve institutional memory that informs future improvement. Effective learning systems combine technology platforms, enabling knowledge sharing with human processes, ensuring utilization. Many successful agencies establish dedicated knowledge management roles, require after action reviews following major initiatives, create cross unit learning forums, and allocate specific time for reflection and documentation rather than treating it as discretionary activity completed only when other work permits. Conclusion. The relationships among public service motivation, red tape, job satisfaction, and innovation are neither simple nor deterministic, yet clear patterns emerge from research and practice. High PSM provides crucial energy for innovation, but organizational conditions determine whether this motivation translates into meaningful improvement or dissipates in frustration. Red tape systematically undermines both satisfaction and innovation, yet procedural reform proves politically challenging, making management of its effects essential interim strategy. Job satisfaction mediates these dynamics, protecting innovative capacity, even in imperfect bureaucracies, when organizations demonstrate genuine commitment to employee well-being and mission achievement. For public sector leaders, several actionable principles merit emphasis. First, transparent acknowledgement of bureaucratic realities combined with authentic procedural reform efforts maintains trust far more effectively than rhetoric about innovation unsupported by concrete barrier reduction. Second, fair process matters as much as optimal outcomes. Employees accept necessary procedures when implementation respects their voice and applies rules consistently. Thibaut and Walker, 1975. Third, capability building requires resource investment, not merely inspirational speeches. Protected time, structured training, and failure tolerance signal genuine commitment. Fourth, governance adaptation proves essential for balancing accountability with experimentation. Organizations cannot innovate systematically while applying uniform procedural requirements across all activities. Fifth, recognition must align with espoused priorities. Rewarding only operational excellence while praising innovation rhetorically fools no one. Finally, sustainable innovation capability requires distributed leadership, continuous learning infrastructure, and regular renewal of psychological contracts between organizations and employees. Rousseau, 1995. The public sector faces escalating complexity requiring continuous innovation. Climate adaptation, digital transformation, demographic shifts, and evolving citizen expectations will not wait for bureaucratic reform. Organizations that successfully navigate the PSM red tape satisfaction nexus, creating conditions where motivated employees can experiment productively despite procedural constraints, will deliver superior public value while attracting and retaining scarce talent. Those that ignore these dynamics will experience predictable deterioration, declining satisfaction, talent exodus, innovation stagnation, and ultimately diminished capacity to serve public purposes. The path forward combines targeted procedural reform to reduce genuine red tape, fair implementation of necessary requirements, capability investment enabling effective innovation, governance adaptation creating space for experimentation, and leadership that honors both accountability imperatives and creative problem solving. This balanced approach proves more realistic than wholesale bureaucratic elimination, yet more ambitious than accepting sclerotic status quo. The evidence demonstrates it's achievable. Across diverse contexts, organizations have successfully energized mission driven employees, reduced bureaucratic friction, sustained satisfaction, and delivered meaningful innovation. Their experiences offer not idealistic visions, but practical roadmaps for leaders committed to building adaptive, effective public institutions worthy of citizen trust.